Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. I honestly think we've been asking the wrong question about Becka and Garth. Ever since the finale, almost every discussion has focused on one moment. Why did Garth lock Becka inside that room? Was he protecting her? Was he controlling her? Does this prove he's secretly loyal to Gilead? Or does it prove he's actually trying to help her? Those are all fair questions. But after sitting with the finale for a while, I don't think that's the mystery anymore. Because the more I thought about it, the more I realized something. The locked door isn't what bothered me. Marriage is. And I don't just mean the marriage itself. I mean everything surrounding it. How it happened. Why it happened. And most importantly, why the writers completely changed Becca's story to make it happen. Because if you've read Margaret Atwood's The Testaments, then you already know Becca's story plays out very differently. She never ends up marrying Garth. Instead, she refuses marriage altogether and eventually becomes an aunt. That's a massive difference. This isn't one of those small changes adaptations make. This is an entirely different future for one of the show's main characters. And whenever a series changes something this important from the source material, I always pay attention. Not because I think every change means something, but because changes like this usually do. Writers don't completely rewrite a character's future unless they believe they're creating something even more important. And honestly, I think that's exactly what's happening here, because the more I look at Becka and Garth's relationship, the less I believe it's supposed to be viewed as a romance. I don't even think it's supposed to be viewed as a tragedy. I think it's supposed to make us uncomfortable, not because either character has done something unforgivable, but because absolutely nothing about their situation feels normal. Think about where Becka is mentally by the time that wedding happens. She's completely broken. She has just killed Dr. Grove. Her mother sacrificed herself to save her. She's grieving. She's exhausting. She's heavily sedated. She's barely aware of what's happening around her. Then suddenly, she's standing at her own wedding. Or at least, her body is. Because emotionally, Becka isn't really there. She isn't making decisions. She isn't planning a future. She's simply surviving the next few minutes. That's what makes the entire sequence so disturbing. Not the wedding itself. The fact that Becka has almost no control over anything happening around her. Then we get to Garth. And this is where things become really interesting, because I don't think Garth looks like someone who's celebrating either. Go back and watch those scenes again. He doesn't look victorious. He doesn't look excited. He doesn't even look relieved. If anything, he looks like someone carrying the weight of a decision he never wanted to make. And that's where this entire theory started for me. Because if Becka didn't truly choose this marriage, did Garth? At first, my answer was yes. Of course he did. He's the one with power. He's the man. This is Gilead. If anyone has a choice here, surely it's Garth, right? But the more I thought about it, the less convinced I became. Because choice inside Gilead isn't nearly as simple as people think. Yes, some characters have more power than others, but almost everyone is trapped by something. Fear, duty, expectation, survival. That's how Gilead works. It doesn't need chains when people become prisoners of the system itself. And I think Garth understands that better than almost anyone. One detail that really stood out to me is how calm Garth usually is throughout the season. He's careful with his words. He rarely acts impulsively. He always seems to understand the room before anyone else does. Whether he's talking to Agnes or dealing with authority figures, Garth comes across as someone who measures every decision before making it. That's important, because characters like that don't suddenly make life-changing decisions without understanding the consequences. So if Garth agreed to this marriage, I don't think he did it because he wanted a wife. I think he did it because he believed there wasn't another way. And that's a completely different conversation, because now we're not talking about romance anymore. We're talking about survival. Here's the part one can't stop thinking about. If the writers simply wanted to show Garth as another loyal man inside Gilead, why make him marry Becka? There are dozens of ways they could have established his loyalty. Instead, they chose the one situation guaranteed to create moral ambiguity. Immediately after the finale, viewers were divided. Some believed Garth saved Becka. Others believed he imprisoned her. Some trusted him even more. Others stopped trusting him completely. That kind of reaction doesn't happen by accident. Good writers know exactly what emotions they're trying to create. And I think uncertainty was the goal, because uncertainty has surrounded Garth since the very beginning. Every time we think we've figured him out, the show gives us another reason to question him. Sometimes he feels compassionate. Other times he feels cold. Sometimes he looks like someone quietly resisting the system. Other times he seems completely comfortable operating inside it. It's almost impossible to place him in one category. And maybe that's exactly the point. Now here's where I think everyone is focusing on the wrong thing. People keep asking whether Garth is good or bad. Personally, I don't think the show wants us asking that question at all. I think it wants us asking whether Garth is free, because those are two very different things. Imagine spending your entire life inside a system where every important decision has already been made for you. Who you marry, where you work, how you speak, what you're allowed to believe. At what point do your choices actually become your own? That's the question I think the finale quietly raises. Not just for Becka, for Garth too. And once you start looking at their relationship through that lens, the entire ending begins to feel very different, because maybe this marriage wasn't designed to show us two people finding each other. Maybe it was designed to show us two people losing themselves. And if that's true, then I think the locked door means something far bigger than keeping Becka inside a room. I think it's symbolic of something that's been happening to both of them all season. Neither Becka nor Garth is walking into a new life. They're walking deeper into Gilead. And that's a terrifying place for this story to begin. And that's where I think the finale quietly reveals what this relationship is really about. It's not about love. It's not even about trust. It's about control. Not control between Becka and Garth. Control over both of them. That's the part one think is easy to miss. Because when people hear the word control, the immediate reaction is to point at Garth. He's the husband. He's the one who locked the door. He's the one carrying Becka into the house. So naturally, all the attention falls on him. But step back for a second. Who actually created this situation? Not Garth. Gilead did. Long before that wedding ever happened, the system had already decided what Becca's future should look like. It had already decided what Garth's responsibilities would be. The marriage wasn't the beginning of their lack of freedom. It was simply the moment neither of them could pretend they still had any. And that's why I think the writers wanted us to feel uncomfortable. Not because they were trying to tell us Garth is secretly evil, but because they wanted us to see how completely Gilead destroys the idea of choice. One thing that keeps standing out to me is how different Becca's ending is compared to the novel. The show completely abandons that path. Instead, it forces Becka into the exact future she spent her life trying to avoid. That's not a random creative decision. That completely changes the emotional meaning of her story. In the novel, Becka still finds a way to exercise some control over her future. In the series, that control is taken away. And the person standing beside her when it happens is Garth. That's why people immediately started questioning him. But here's something I don't think enough people are talking about. What if Garth isn't the reason Becka lost her freedom? What if he's simply trapped inside the exact same system? Think about every important choice Garth makes throughout the season. He's careful, measured, patient. He rarely lets emotion dictate his actions. That isn't how someone behaves when they believe they're completely free. That's how someone behaves when every mistake could destroy their future. The more I look back at his scenes, the more I get the feeling that Garth is constantly calculating risk. What can he say? What can't he say? Who can he trust? Who might be listening? Those aren't the habits of someone living comfortably inside Gilead. Those are survival instincts. Now, does that automatically mean Garth is secretly working against the regime? No. I don't think the show has earned that conclusion yet, but I do think it's earned a different one. I think Garth understands exactly how dangerous Gilead is. And people who understand danger don't always get to make heroic choices. Sometimes they settle for the least terrible option available. That's what makes the finale so heartbreaking. Because if Garth believed marrying Becka was the only way to keep her alive, then suddenly his actions become much harder to judge. Notice I said harder, not impossible. Because that's another thing I really appreciate about the finale. It doesn't ask us to forgive Garth. It asks us to question him. There's a difference. We're supposed to sit with that discomfort. We're supposed to wonder whether protecting someone inside an oppressive system can ever be completely separated from participating in that system. That's an incredibly complicated question, and I think it's much more interesting than simply deciding whether Garth is a hero or a villain. Then there's the locked door, the scene everyone keeps talking about. I went back and watched it again because I wanted to understand why it stayed with me. At first, I thought it was the act itself. Then I realized it wasn't. It was the image, a locked door, a frightened young woman, a husband standing on the other side. If you strip away all the dialogue, It's one of the most symbolic images in the entire finale, because that door doesn't just separate Becka from the outside world. It represents every invisible wall Gilead has spent years building around its people. Women are trapped. Men are trapped by expectations. Families are trapped by fear. Even people with authority spend their lives looking over their shoulders. Nobody is truly free. That's why I think focusing only on whether Garth was protecting Becka misses the bigger picture. The real prison isn't the bedroom. The real prison is Gilead itself. That room just makes it impossible to ignore. There's another reason I think the writers changed Becca's storyline from the novel. Conflict. Not conflict between Becka and Garth. Conflict inside Garth. If Becka had followed the same path she takes in the book, Garth wouldn't be forced into this impossible position. By rewriting Becca's future, the series also rewrites his. Now every decision he makes carries emotional consequences. Every conversation matters more. Every choice becomes morally complicated. That's much richer storytelling. And honestly, I think that's exactly why they did it. Because the moment those two characters were placed together, neither one could remain the same. Becka can no longer view Gilead from a distance. She's trapped inside one of its most intimate institutions, marriage. At the same time, Garth can no longer hide behind duty alone. Now another person's life is directly connected to every decision he makes, whether he wants that responsibility or not. That changes him too. Which brings me back to the title of this video. Something is definitely wrong about Becka and Garth. But I don't think it's what most people think. I don't think the relationship itself is the mystery. I think the circumstances surrounding it are. Because this relationship wasn't built on love. It wasn't built on trust. It wasn't even built on choice. It was built by a system that treats human beings like pieces on a chessboard. That's why it feels so unsettling. It should. The writers wanted it to. And I actually think that's why this storyline works so well. It forces us into an uncomfortable position. We want someone to blame. We want a clear villain. We want an easy answer. But the finale refuses to give us one. Instead, it leaves us asking much harder questions. Can someone participate in an oppressive system while trying to protect another person? Can survival still come at the cost of someone else's freedom? Can a relationship created through coercion ever become something genuine? Those aren't easy questions, and I don't think the series wants easy answers. Personally, I don't believe Becka and Garth's story is over. In fact, I think it's only just beginning, because once the wedding is over, the real challenge starts. Now they have to live with what happened. Now they have to figure out whether trust is even possible. Now they have to navigate a marriage that neither of them truly chose. And I have a feeling that's exactly why the writers changed Becca's story in the first place. Not to shock book readers, not simply to surprise the audience, but to create one of the most emotionally complicated relationships in the entire series. One built on fear, responsibility, sacrifice, and impossible choices. The kind of relationship where every future scene is going to make us question what we think we know. And honestly, I think that's far more interesting than giving us a simple love story. But that's just my take. Do you think Garth was genuinely trying to protect Becka? Or do you think there's something much bigger going on beneath the surface of their relationship that we haven't fully understood yet? Let me know what you think down in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next one.